Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to use cognitive science to get a job, do it well, and advance your career, then do we have the Bring Your Brain to Work show for you. Today I'll be talking with Dr. Art Markman, leading cognitive scientist, professor of psychology and marketing at the University of Texas at Austin, and the executive director of IC Squared Institute. He's the co-host of Two Guys on Your Head, think about that for a second, and the author of several brain-boosting books, including Smart Thinking and his latest, Bring Your Brain to Work. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about using cognitive science to get a job, do it well, and advance your career. That, plus we'll talk about souvenir coins and the Franklin Institute, journaling and kickball, Julius Caesar and Benjamin Franklin, what on earth's wrong with TGIF, sax players and ska bands, choosing blenders and choosing jobs, Tom Ward and alien creatures, and what in the world the Lake Wobegon effect has to do with anything. So welcome to the show, Art. Are you ready to shine?
I am. It is good to be here.
It is great to have you here. Before we dive right into things, what'd your 23-year-old son call you up and tell you on the phone about his job?
So he's actually called me about a bunch of things, but the very first thing that he called me about was actually even before he got the job. Mm-hmm. That he was on the phone with me, and he had just interviewed, and they offered him a job that he was completely unqualified for. And he said to me, so they want me to, I've never done this job before, and now they want me to actually take one step above that. And what do I do? And I said to him, well, say yes. And what I really focused on with him was, look, if you ever apply for a job you're completely qualified for, you've aimed too low, right? It's all about growing into the job that you get and not being completely ready for the thing that you're in. And, particularly for him, he was pretty fresh out of college. And, you spend so much time in school where there's a curriculum and you know exactly what you're supposed to do and exactly what you're going to be tested on. To go from that into the world in which it's never the least bit clear what it is you're going to need to know next and what it is you're going to need to do next. That willingness to grow is so important, and you have to instill that in yourselves and change a lot of your habits.
That's the growth mindset of Dr. Carol Dweck. So
Yeah.
if I'm understanding correctly, what you're saying is if the job doesn't scare you at least a little bit, turn it down.
Or at least if you don't feel slightly unprepared for it. Whether you're scared or not is a whole different thing. So fear is the reflection of, so I talk in the book about the motivational brain.
Yes.
I talk about several brains. They're really brain systems. The motivational brain is what you engage when you have some goal. And we have two kinds of goals. We have approach goals and avoidance goals. And when you have an avoidance goal activated, meaning there's some negative thing out there in the world, the emotions you experience are emotions of fear, stress, and anxiety. And why am I saying all this? Because if you are afraid of a new job, it means that you are approaching that job with avoidance motivation. You are concerned about it. There's another way to address a challenge, which is to be excited for that challenge, to say, you know what, I don't completely know how to do this, but I am going to dive in. I am approaching this situation. I am engaged with this. And so I'm reacting to, it's not that you should be afraid, it's that you might feel a little unprepared, and you should be excited about that lack of preparation.
So I like to say fear and anxiety is excitement without action. Deliberate action, when we figure out where we want to go, we can turn that into fuel. I was talking with you off the show. We're going to be looking at getting a pilot greenlit and in Hollywood, and we're just starting down this process. And I'm going, I have no idea, honestly, no idea how we're going to do this. I know we have the connections. I know we have the track record to pull it off. And so those butterflies are actually fuel and excitement to spur us on.
It's energy, right? And I always like to say there's a great analogy from physics. So energy without direction is heat, but energy with direction is work. And so what you really want to do is to take that energy and turn it into work.
Woohoo!
Yes.
So talk about energy and turning it into work. How long have you been studying careers in the brain, and what got you interested in it? What was the energy?
So I've been studying cognitive psychology for the last 30 plus years. And I started off doing basic research in cognitive science. And so for the first 10, 15 years of my career, I studied things like reasoning and decision making and motivation. And I wrote papers that got read by 30 of my closest colleagues. And at some point, I looked around the world and realized that almost everybody I know has a mind. Almost nobody knows how that mind works, and that people would live their lives differently and better if they understood more about the way minds work. And so I decided to spend much more of my time really bringing research, my own research and other people's, outward to as many people as I could reach. And that led me to think about this in a much broader way. And over the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years, I've been doing a lot more writing for a variety of websites, including Fast Company. Mm-hmm. And with the folks at Fast Company, I said to them, I'd love to write for you, but I don't really know what topics you want. So if you'll feed me topics, I'll return with stuff. And everything that they were asking me about was career related. It was how do I do on an interview? What happens if I make a mistake at work? What do I do if I'm unhappy at my job? And I was writing this in these 500-word bursts, and I realized, maybe there's actually a much broader statement here to put it all in one place and try and put a framework around it that people could use to think about their careers.
Beautiful. So let's go from there. Let's talk about this framework. I'm wondering if our brains set us up for success. And I said brains because do we have one brain or three?
Well, in the book, I'll say we even have 3.5, right? Because what I do in the book is to say, look, there's several intersecting brain systems, one of which I call the motivational brain. Yep. Which is, I've already mentioned, which is that system that engages the goals you have, puts energy behind them, and helps you to really perform actions that will bring you towards the completion of those goals. Then we have our social brain, which is that brain that we use to manage our social interactions, to communicate effectively, to listen well, to understand the body language and things like that people are displaying. And then we have our cognitive brain, which is that brain that we use for problem solving, for learning, for storing information, for retaining our memories. And all of those play a role. And then as a bonus in the book, I talk about the jazz brain, which it reflects that ability that we have to improvise, to take the knowledge we have and go a step beyond. And really that jazz brain reflects the fact that as you mentioned in the open, for the last 18 years now, I've been playing the saxophone. Took it up in my mid-30s, and I play in a ska band, but I play jazz for fun, and I've learned so much from jazz that has turned out to influence the way that I think about work and the workplace.
I can think of so many incredibly positive things having to do with picking up music and picking up jazz in the 30s and picking up an instrument in the 30s, from brain plasticity, you're doing ska. That's hard because you have to improvise continuously and take in lots of information and let it go at the same time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You have to be in the moment. So many of the problems that people face, and because of all the focus on mindfulness, right? That you have. So many people don't live in the moment that they're in. They're living in the past or they're living in the future. They're worried about something that happened a while back and its implications. They are concerned about something that's going to happen, and they're not living right now. And obviously we have to plan for the future. We have to be aware of the things that happened in the past. It's not that we can completely discount them, but at some point you got to be in the moment. And one of the beautiful things about music is you can't play music effectively if you're not in that moment.
So let's go from music and let's look at the next piece of this puzzle. Let's now talk about finding opportunities you'll value. What's wrong with find your passion?
Boy, I hate that advice, right? We give that to people all the time. Find your passion. So it turns out there's several issues that are wrong with that. Yeah. And to understand really what you're trying to accomplish, you have to understand that each of us has a set of things that we value. There's a wonderful researcher in social psychology named Shalom Schwartz who has studied values systems across cultures. And what he's demonstrated is that there's a universal system of values and that cultures will promote particular values and individuals within that culture may adopt values that may be the same or different from the ones that their culture promotes. But that all of us can learn a lot about ourselves by paying attention to those values. And those values include things like some people value achievement. What they would like to do is to be successful and to be seen as a success by others. There are other people who value tradition. They care about their culture. They care about continuing on those traditions of the past. There are other people who value benevolence. What they care about is doing good for other people and making sure that the most other people have what they want. There are other people who value hedonism, pleasure. What they want is to experience wonderful, joyful emotions for themselves. And all of us may carry those things to a small degree, but there's always one or two of those values that are very deeply held for each of us. And if you don't know what your values are, then you will have a very hard time establishing a career that allows you to express those values. And frankly, you're going to spend 75,000 hours over the course of your life engaged in your career, plus or minus. You want that to add up to something that allows you to express those values that you have. So rather than trying to find some task that you're passionate about, find things that you can do, find organizations you can work with that allow you to express that set of values that are important to you, bearing in mind, of course, that over the course of your life, those values may shift a little.
Here's the crazy thing about this, because what you're saying is align with your values rather than your, quote, passion. But now we live in a society where, we almost bow down to the 18 or 20-year-old millionaires. We say you have to find a major either before you're in school or else we're going to give you this label of undeclared, like you're completely lost at age 19. What is wrong with this picture?
As I point out in the book, it's the thing that bothers me the most about working at the University of Texas. I love UT, hook 'em horns for all you Horns fans out there. But the thing is, we make our students come in and declare a major. And you know what? We have kids who are 18 years old. And I ask people, think back when you're 5. When you're 5 years old, if everyone had to have the career that they wanted when they were 5, the world would be full of, I don't know, firefighters and race car drivers and
astronauts.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but we change. And we know we're going to change from 5 to adulthood. But we're going to change after the age of 18 as well. I mean, when you're 18 years old, all you know is, what your parents did, what your parents' friends did. I remember taking one of those career surveys when I was 18 years old, and it told me I should be an accountant. Not because I wanted to be an accountant, because my dad's an accountant, because I was hanging around accountants all the time. I had no business being an accountant, and thankfully I'm not. It worked well for my dad. I'm not saying nobody should be an accountant. I'm saying I shouldn't have been an accountant. And so we need to experience things. The world is way more interesting than our imagination is. We have to, it's funny. People think, well, use your imagination. You know what? Your imagination is so heavily constrained by what you know already that what you need to do instead is to be open to listening to what the world has to tell you and to be open to hearing about all kinds of new experiences.
And kicking ourselves out as far of the box as we possibly can.
Absolutely.
What does meaning and purpose, in fact, you share a story, it's probably more anecdotal, about President Kennedy and a maintenance worker. What's meaning and purpose have to do with things?
Yeah, so the people who are happiest about their jobs, who are most satisfied with their jobs, these are the people who see their life and their work as part of a calling. Now, how do you create that sense of calling, or what's sometimes also been called vocation? The way you get that is by feeling like you are part of something that's bigger than yourself, that helps people more broadly, where it's not the particular tasks you're performing, but rather the mission that you're a part of that's so important. So now let's get back to this probably apocryphal story about President Kennedy. Because a lot of times people will say, sure, if you're lucky enough to be a college professor or to be doing this kind of highfalutin work, well, then you can see your work as a calling. But anyone, no matter what tasks you're performing, can begin to see their work as part of something bigger than themselves. And the story goes that Kennedy had gone to Cape Canaveral, what later became called Cape Kennedy, and he was checking on the process of the space program, and he ran into a maintenance worker who was, cleaning some stuff up. And he stopped and he said, "So what do you do?" And he said, "I'm sending someone to the moon." Right? And the beauty of the beauty of that story is that you don't have to view the contribution of what you're doing in your life as being solely defined by the specific tasks. It's how those tasks fit into a broader mission that you are playing a significant role in.
Awesome, awesome. So let's go from there. Now let's talk about how we decide on a job. You talk about not editing your life in the forward direction. What's wrong with declaring we know exactly where we want to go?
The issue is that the world is just a way more interesting place than you could know it would be. And so the problem with planning completely in advance and then adhering to that plan, and that's what I mean by editing in the forward direction, is I've got this vision for myself and I'm only going to do that, is that you then miss out on opportunities that were not things that you had considered that might be far better than anything you knew about already. I mean, look, as you mentioned in the open, I have a radio show and podcast here in Austin. It's called Two Guys on Your Head. At no point in my life prior to doing that did I ever think, oh yeah, someday I'm going to be on the radio. And then I went and gave a talk with a friend of mine at a great event that they have here in Austin called Views and Brews, which is produced by our local NPR affiliate. Mm-hmm. And it's just a wonderful conversation that we have in a bar that's on the UT campus. And after we did that, sometime after we did that, the producer of Views and Brews came back to us and said, "Hey, that was fun. Would you guys like a show?" And we sort of stared at each other. Neither of us had ever considered, oh yeah, we want a radio show. But then she said, oh yeah, think about it like the NPR show Car Talk, but for the mind. And we're like, oh yeah, we could do that. And the next thing we knew, we were on the radio, and we've been doing it for almost, for 6 years now. And it's been enriching and wonderful and beautiful, and neither of us would have predicted that we'd be doing this. And had we edited that in the forward direction and said, nah, we're not really radio people, then we would have missed out on something really amazing.
As someone who shares your love for the show or for shows or being on the air, and we're 1,140 plus episodes in, if you had asked me 4 years and a week ago what I'm going to be doing next in my life, this wasn't on the radar.
Yeah.
So you used an important word. You said considered. We hadn't even considered. What are consideration sets and values, and how do they help us find a job?
Yeah. So in the psychology of decision making, there's a key concept called the consideration set. And the idea behind a consideration set is that's the set of options that you're actually choosing from among. Now, in some cases, you get that consideration set by going to the store. So if you walk into, and I think you mentioned this in the open, if you walk yourself into, say, your favorite big box retailer, then, which I did once, I had to buy a blender, and, there was a wall of blenders. There were like 38 blenders there. And the thing was that which blender I was going to choose was now completely constrained by the store that I walked into. That was my consideration set.
And your past blenders.
What was that?
And your past blenders, your history with blenders.
Oh, yes, absolutely. You're right. And so good and bad, right? Yeah. I certainly didn't want one like the one that had just broken. So I had to get another one. But I would say that when it comes to jobs, part of the problem is that you have to construct that consideration set. You have to go seek out places where there are potential employers, some of which might be on job websites, some of which might be in other kinds of advertisements, some of which might be at job fairs, but you have to go build that out. And part of the problem then becomes, how do you find the right number of opportunities? And so part of this is we often do it by focusing on our qualifications rather than our values. So we think to ourselves, well, this is what I majored in when I was in college. These are the skills that I've developed while I was working in other jobs. And so you start looking for stuff based on the tasks. And it's important, of course, to be somewhat qualified for the thing that you apply for. No one is going to hire you if you have no qualifications whatsoever. But at the same time, you also want to be looking at broader issues like what exactly does this organization do? What am I going to be contributing towards? How is this going to help me to achieve the long-term goals that I have for my career? And you want both of those to play a role. And then you want to create a consideration set that's actually bigger than you think you need it to be.
In other words, cast a huge, huge net.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think a lot of people start their job search and they think, well, here are the 5 jobs that are perfect for me. I'm just going to apply to those. Well, you got to go beyond that for all kinds of reasons, not the least of which is so much of that process is completely out of your control. Some number of the job ads that go up are earmarked to another person already. They had to advertise the job, but they already know who they want to hire. So there's all sorts of factors that you can't control. So you've got to throw stuff out there and recognize that even jobs that don't look like exactly the right one for you might actually be brilliant for you once you get into them because the organization is a good one, because the organization wants you to succeed and wants to train you and has that growth mindset as you were talking about earlier, that if you walk in expecting to grow in that job, then all sorts of wonderful things can happen, even if the job itself doesn't appear to be perfect the way it was written by the people who were advertising it.
That's an important line that you just said. Written by the people who were advertising, because in essence, I'm guessing that you're going to say, if I said, I don't have exactly the right qualifications, should I still apply?
Yeah, and the answer is yes, as long as you have most of them. Again, you don't want to apply for a job that you're completely unqualified for. But if you're well on your way towards it, then most organizations know that you are going to come in needing to learn things as in that job. And in fact, the people that they really want are people who want to learn things because their hope is to bring you on and to nurture you and develop you to the point where you can take on new jobs after that. And so they want to see people who are excited about taking on those new challenges.
And I think that's important. That's a key. And if you're a recruiter, we've been hiring this past week, and we know more important than the exact qualifications, although there are certain things that we do want. How trainable, how excited, how much energy will they have? How much are they willing to be somebody to go in, get their hands dirty, and figure it out themselves?
Oh yeah. It's so important. And again, particularly for younger people in the job market, we've trained ourselves to be focused on curricula, to be focused on what's on the syllabus, what's going to be on the exam, as opposed to saying, what's the challenge in front of me and how can I attack that? I always say my least favorite question as a college professor is,
what's going to be on the exam?
Yeah, because that presumes that I know what they're going to need to know for the rest of their lives. So if they encounter a piece of information and then they say to me, is this going to be on the exam? What I tell them is, yes, but it might not be my exam. Yeah, exactly.
Let's go from there. And that's good because we have to. It's going back to Carol Dweck again. We have to become resilient. And a lot of the educational system is teaching us to become memorizers, or else I'm going to call it a mesmerizer. You're just in a trance state.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I love Carol Dweck and I were colleagues back at Columbia when I taught there. And she's terrific. I'm thrilled that her concept of growth mindsets has had such an impact across the world. And really, the aspect of resilience there that's so important is how do we deal with challenge? And every life is going to have challenge. Every person that you look at who is successful has had to overcome challenges. And I think that willingness to move on to the next thing in the face of okay, this didn't go well, I didn't get this position, I had a setback. So what do? I always say, look, the 40, give yourself 48 hours. I'll tell a quick story. I was this fall. There was a position at the university I really was interested in. I applied for it. I did not get it. Yeah. And so for the weekend, I felt bad. I was really, upset and complaining.
As if your Giants had lost.
Exactly. And so I gave myself the weekend, and then I was like, because you gotta be willing to experience the emotions you're having. You can't suppress them. You can't say, well, it's wrong to feel these. No, you feel them. That's the way you feel. Great. And after the weekend was over, I'm like, all right, what's next? And as it turns out, very soon after, an opportunity came about to become the executive director of the IC Squared Institute, and I'm here in my brand new office. I got my very first day with office furniture, so I'm very excited. But you have to be willing to. Not everything is going to come out the way you want it to, and you have to learn from that. You have to then if there's a little grief you have to go through, great, but then you got to just move on to the next thing, because success is not about always succeeding. Success is about overcoming the roadblocks in order to achieve the things you want to achieve.
Woohoo! My wife and I, we teach methods of manifestation, of bringing things about in your life. And for all of our manifestation work, we add a tagline to the end of it. For our highest good, the highest good of all, or something better, meaning right. We don't pretend to have the answer. Let's switch gears from there. Let's talk now about learning faster and working smarter. And what's wrong with pretending at work that we have all the answers?
Yeah. Well, first of all, because we don't. And there's several issues there. The first is the last thing you want at work is to be constrained only by the things you already know, because the world is changing. No matter what your job is, there are new technologies, there are new ways of doing things, there are new products, there are new procedures. And so if you pretend you know everything, you put blinders on and don't expose yourself to the things you don't know already. And as a result, you don't learn them, and you don't improve, and you don't get better. And the problem is there's always somebody else who's doing that. If you want to be successful, you have to stay at that leading edge. There's no opportunity to just rest on your laurels. And so you have to be willing to admit what you don't know. Because the thing is, you can't fix a gap in your knowledge and skills that you aren't willing to admit that you have. And it is not a sign of weakness to say, here's something I don't know.
In fact, that could be a sign of strength to have that confidence to say, I don't know, where should I go, or how can you help me with this?
Yes. And the help bit is so important. We human beings are amazing. If you ask, how did human beings come to dominate planet Earth? It is not because of our fearsome physical presence. As I like to point out, take your favorite, football player who's big and burly and whatever. And you put that guy up against a bear, like a bear, not a Chicago bear. I mean, like an actual bear.
Yes. I've got you. We have them at the house here on occasion.
Yeah. Those bears win every time, right? Because a bear is a fearsome physical creature. So why is it that we're sitting at the top of the proverbial food chain? It's because we can learn. And not only can we can learn things that our evolutionary forebears had no idea was going to be important. And what we're able to learn, the reason we're able to learn so effectively is because we learn from each other. We are constantly learning new things. I mean, people are tuning into your podcast because they want to learn. And we have to be willing to do that with everybody, no matter where you are, no matter what your position is in an organization, top to bottom. Everybody should be reaching out to other people who know things that they don't and say, teach me. Help me to understand this thing that you know.
So that segues here. It's critically important, isn't it, that we not only get a mentor, we get a mentoring team in place in our organization so that we can learn, not to mention that network and growth.
Yes, that's right. So a lot of times people say, oh yeah, I need a mentor at work. And I really, as you point out, talk about the fact that what you need is a team of mentors. And the reason that you need a mentoring team is because there's never a single individual who has everything you need. there's always somebody who just knows how the organization works, knows which person to talk to when you need a particular thing. There's always some superstar out there who's succeeded in the way that you'd like to succeed, and you just want to find out anything that they can tell you about what it is that's given them some amount of success. And then there are people who are who are really just, they're very productive. And so you want to understand, well, what are their productivity skills? And then there are people who are just really good listeners, and you need to learn resilience skills from them so that you can say, well, this really went wrong, and they can listen to what you're saying and reflect it back and then help you to move on. So what you want to do is to look around and find all of those people who have knowledge and skills and emotional intelligence that you feel like you can improve on, and get those people to help you. And not only do you learn a ton from those people, but those people now gain a vested interest in your success. Yeah. Because now, having helped you, they want to see you succeed. And so they start looking out for you, looking out for opportunities for you. And they know that you're hungry, and they know that you're willing to learn, and they know that you're the kind of person who will benefit the organization. And so by building up that group, you not only supercharge your ability to perform, but you actually now create your own advocacy team that helps you to move forward in your career.
I love it. This also gets into kind of the concept of heart and connection. You talk about the importance of learning with your head and your heart, and of conscientiousness.
Yeah. So now we get back to among other things, to jazz, right? If you read a lot of books on jazz improvisation, one of the things that they point out is that improvisers often come in one of two flavors as they're developing. Some people are head players, so they learn the theory. They can look at a score and say, oh yeah, this is the scale that I play over this collection of chord changes. And then there are heart players, and the heart players aren't really delving into the music theory. What they're doing is saying, well, this feels right in this situation. And what the improvisation books point out is that if you really want to be a masterful improviser, you need to play with head and heart. You need to learn. You need to know the theory. You need to understand why the world works the way it does. And then you also need to listen and engage and feel, and bring those things together in order to create the new plan that's different from what people have done before. Now, here's the interesting thing about the concept of conscientiousness when it comes to this. Conscientiousness is one of the big 5 personality characteristics. So the personality psychologists have pointed out that there's 5 major sources of difference between people in the way that we're motivated, and conscientiousness is one of them. And conscientiousness, by the way, is a very positive term in the way that we use it in normal language. We think, well, being conscientious, you finish what you start, you're reliable. And it's true that the personality construct of conscientiousness is associated with completing tasks you start. It's also, though, associated with following the rules. And you might say, well, following the rules is great. But of course, the answer is following the rules is great, except when it isn't. Yeah. And the really creative people, the people who think outside the box, who destroy the current paradigm, those are people actually who are willing to break the rules in order to try something new. And so actually being too constrained by your conscientiousness can actually make it harder to play with head and heart, because your head might tell you go in this new direction, and then your heart says, but I want to stay with the comfortable rules. And so you have to be willing to break out of that and to say, you know what, the rules can be great sometimes, but sometimes I got to go outside that and do something new and different.
I love it. When I train somebody for a big event, whether that's a sports event, something career-oriented, theater, whatever it is, we do a lot of practical work. And then on the day of the big event, I tell them to forget it all and let it all go.
Yeah, let it rip. It's so important. I mean, I think, I work with a lot of people who are gonna do public speaking.
Yeah.
And public speaking is one of those things that is so scary for most people that we actually routinely, as psychologists in our field, use it as a stress manipulation. We tell people you're about to give a public speech, you're going to prepare it for 10 minutes, and then you're going to give it in front of a group of experts. And people get really, really stressed out by that. And what I tell people all the time is, look, you got to know your stuff, you got to be ultra prepared. But then at the end of the day, you got to take a little bit of a lesson from stand-up comedy, right? Stand-up comedians talk a lot about death. If they have a great set, they killed it, right? Yeah. And if they go up on stage and they bomb, they died. And you know what I tell people is you can't be afraid to die on stage, because actually when you go up there and you give a terrible talk, the world actually doesn't end. Nobody actually dies. It's really not that bad. So that thing that you're so worried about, it's really not that important. So get out there and go after it. And more often than not, it's actually a wonderful experience.
Woohoo!
Yeah, exactly.
I can't resist. And I'm somebody who, I guess I read a book a day and then do a book report before hundreds of thousands of people each and every day. So I have learned a lot about let go to a whole new level of letting go. Before we jump topics here, I can't help resisting. What can you tell us about the Lake Wobegon effect?
Yeah. So Lake Wobegon, of course, from Garrison Keillor, who created the NPR radio show Prairie Home Companion, and it was set in the fictional town of Lake Wobegon, where the women are strong, the men are good looking, and all the children are above average. And it's that last bit, all of the children are above average, that is the source of something in psychology that's called the Lake Wobegon effect, which is that if you ask people, how good are you at some set of tasks? On average, people think they're above average. So we tend to and of course, we can't all be above average, which means that on average, we are overestimating how good we are at things. We're overconfident. Now, there's a refinement of the Lake Wobegon effect from a couple of psychologists that has now become known as the Dunning-Kruger effect after these psychologists. And the Dunning-Kruger effect says, yes, people are overconfident, and the people who are most overconfident are the ones who are actually least capable in an area. And this is a problem because, well, you could ask, well, why are the people who are worst most overconfident? The answer is because the less you understand about something, the less you realize how complicated doing that is. So if you don't know how to play chess, you figure, well, how hard could it be to play chess? And then the more you learn about the number of openings there are and other things, the more you realize it's a very difficult thing. And so the reason that this is really important is when you first start in a job, you often look at what your boss is doing and think to yourself, how hard could that be? There's so many ways we could improve this place if they would just listen to me, as opposed to recognizing the complexity of running a large organization and keeping it afloat and all of the constraints that have to be achieved. Yeah, you might be able to fix a small problem, but that small problem, the way you fix it, might actually create all sorts of other problems that you didn't anticipate because you didn't understand the complexity of the system. So it's really important early on to listen and to learn and to understand why the world that you've entered into is much more complex than you thought it was.
And because the world is continuously changing, to look for continuing education opportunities from your boss informally, formally from trainings, anywhere you can.
Absolutely, yeah. Whether it's online or going into a formal program, there are certificate programs that are out there. There are degree programs that are out there. You have got to constantly be looking to improve yourself. And that also opens up so many new opportunities. I mean, that's the thing I think people don't appreciate. The more you learn, the more you become eligible for in your life. That enrichment is not just I learned this new skill. It's that it opens up all sorts of new opportunities.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Let's switch gear from here and let's talk about great communication in the workplace and what in the world is wrong with texting.
Well, texting can be okay, right? Texting your significant other that you're headed home, fine.
Yeah.
But what we have to understand about human communication is we are optimized for face-to-face communication among a small number of people happening in visual contact in real time. And the further and further that we get away from that, the harder and harder it is to communicate effectively. And so when we distill our communication down to text, and particularly short bursts of text like you get in a text message, all sorts of things are missing. Your tone of voice is missing. Your facial expression is missing. The level of excitement you're trying to convey is missing. And you have to say everything really tersely. So, if I'm in the workplace and I need someone to help me out with something, I can poke my head into somebody's office and say, listen, I hate to bother you. I know you're really busy, but I've got to get this thing out. Is there any way that you could just copy this stack of things for me real quick? I'd really appreciate it. Now, saying that, writing that out, you wouldn't write it out with all of those extra
Nuances.
words. It would take too long. So you'd say, I'm really busy. Could you make these copies? Would you make these copies for me? Well, that already is terse. It now feels like an order. I'm not conveying any of my humanity. And in all of these ways, it makes my interactions with other people harder. So I don't come across as sympathetic if all I do is to send my information over text. You can't hear my voice behind it. And if I say anything that's even slightly ambiguous, I create these opportunities for miscommunication. And now either you misunderstand what I mean and do the wrong thing. Like maybe there's 2 stacks of paper and you're not sure which one. So you grab the one you think I mean, and now you copy the wrong one. I wasted your time. Yeah. Or, we go back and forth for 15 minutes over text, doing something that would have taken 8 seconds in a face-to-face communication. So for all of these reasons, this movement in the workplace towards doing more and more of our communication just through text is actually making it harder for us to engage with our colleagues, with our clients, with our customers, with all the people that we have to deal with.
I know I've just hired a new editor for cutting up these pieces for YouTube. I'm all excited about it. We do this big format change at the moment. And my editor is overseas, and we've been going back and forth on text. And I was thinking about this morning because I believe in the richest form of communication possible. I'm thinking, well, I said everything that I needed to say. I'm going to call him via Skype like this so we can see each other anyway, which produced the most important result of them all, a smile.
Right. Yeah. Right, which is that bond between people matters a ton because I think the thing that we discount in the workplace is the value of the relationships with the people that we engage with, whether they're customers, clients, or colleagues. We live in a world in which business is often framed primarily in terms of economics, and economics tends to put dollar values on things. And it's very hard to put a dollar value on the relationship that you have with someone. But when you create goodwill with somebody, it enables all sorts of things in the future. It enables you to overcome mistakes more easily. It enables you to ask someone to go above and beyond what they need to do because it's important to you and they trust you. But you have to create those relationships. You don't have them on day one. They don't exist by virtue of the authority you're given in an org chart. They exist because of the ability to create that relationship through communicating with people. And that smile that you get is the one that says, I understand you, this is wonderful, and we're on the same page.
Woohoo!
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm almost afraid to ask, what's wrong with meetings today?
Well, meetings are important, right? I mean, that is a good meeting can be extraordinarily productive. There are several problems with meetings, and the most important is that we don't design them in the right way. In fact, we often don't design them at all. We just get together and maybe we have an agenda. But I think we can learn a real lesson from education. Yeah. What educators teach us is the way you design a class is through what's called backward design. You start by saying, what do I want my students to look like at the end of the course? What do I want them to know? What do I want them to be able to do? And then you work backwards to where they are right now, and you create a bridge between where they are right now and where you want them to be. Well, meetings should be the same. You should ask yourself, how do I want the people at this meeting to be different at the end than they were at the beginning? And then structure that meeting around making them different in that way, which might be there are some things they need to know, but maybe it's I need people to be engaged. And so what I'm going to be doing with this meeting is trying to create opportunities for people to develop some motivational engagement around the topic that we're discussing.
So let's talk about in the actual meeting, if we're a participant in the meeting. I used to coach a lot of students with learning disabilities and attention deficit disorder for that matter. And I had an index card tool where I wanted them to write their question down on an index card before they asked it, and then to check in and see, does this add value so that I'm not attempting to dominate the class?
Yeah. The worst meetings are the ones where there's one person who just keeps saying things, keeps going on and on. The whole point of having a meeting with several people in it is that everyone needs to be a part of it. And that there's two different responsibilities there. One is that each of us as participants should walk in and do exactly what you're saying, which is to ask, am I adding value by this particular participation? There's a tendency in meetings for people to do a lot of me tooing, where everyone's got to say a version of the same thing someone just said so that they can be on record as having just agreed. You don't need to do that, right? If somebody made the good point, great, nod your head, move on. The other thing is that if you are running the meeting, you want to be looking out for that dominator. And really try to call out those people who probably have some important contribution to make but haven't yet spoken, and make sure that they're heard from. Make sure that it's not just the most energetic, the most extroverted people who are participating. It can be hard. Another one of those big 5 personality characteristics, extroversion and introversion. If you're on that introverted side, you don't like to have that spotlight of attention shown on you. But you may actually have something really important to contribute, and maybe the meeting leader needs to coax you out of that a little bit.
And if you're the meeting leader, you've got to understand diversity is what's going to give you the best outcome. Just hearing that one voice, no matter how energized, could put you into trouble in a heartbeat.
Oh, absolutely. The thing about groups is that when groups work together, they tend to converge in their opinion on things. And that can be wonderful. If you're trying to create consensus, that group decision can be valuable, but you don't want to converge too fast. And if you have one person dominating the meeting, those other opinions don't get aired in ways that don't allow the group to consider alternatives at a point where they still might be able to reach a different conclusion.
Thank you. A couple last things on communication, not avoiding hard conversations at work. How do we do that?
Well, so there are different kinds of hard conversations, but at the end of the day, one of the things that they all come down to is yet another one of the big 5 personality characteristics, which is one called agreeableness. Agreeableness says, how much do I want to be to get along with the people around me? And the more agreeable I am, the more that I structure my interactions to be liked at all times. Unfortunately, there are times where you have to tell somebody something they don't want to hear. That they did a bad job, that they're not going to get the promotion that they wanted, that something's gone wrong. And in those moments, you have to be willing to deliver that bad news clearly and constructively. You have to be willing to tell people that things aren't necessarily going to go the way they want them to, but you may also want to help them to think about how they might move forward and do something productive in the future. But you have to recognize that if you approach a difficult conversation with some amount of sensitivity, that actually it doesn't go as badly as you fear, and it goes worse if you beat around the bush, if you try to say it indirectly. If you come out and say it, or even if you have to apologize for something, if you just come out and apologize for it instead of hiding that you did something wrong, those are difficult circumstances. But if you just own it, say it, and then move to understanding how to move forward effectively, then you create difficult conversations that become collaborations. And that's ultimately what you want. You're trying to create people who are working together towards a common goal.
I remember in a fashion business, fashion company I was working with years ago, the controller called me into the office, started talking with me, and then she said, "Do you want the truth?" And I said, "Absolutely." And she said, "Mind closing the door?" And I closed the door, and she goes, "Michael, you're an asshole." And and then she went on to share why, and we actually became the best of friends because I was willing to be there, to truly be present and to listen and to own what she was saying and make changes accordingly.
Yeah, yeah. And on both sides of that equation, it's so important. It's so important that when you're giving feedback to someone, that you give that feedback directly, and then you create a collaborative process for moving forward. And it's important when you're on the other side of that criticism that you do whatever you can to avoid being defensive about it, and you say to yourself, all right, so how do I get better tomorrow? My goal is not to be perfect today.
Yeah.
It's just to be better tomorrow than I was yesterday.
I love it. So let's go from there. Let's switch gears. Let's talk about moving away, on, or up. How do I know if I should move away, move on, or move up in this company?
Yeah. So move away means I'm going to change my career altogether.
Yeah.
And you know what? Sometimes that's the right thing to do. And that actually gets back, full circle to thinking about those values again. The fact is that our values change over the course of our lives. Early on, it might be that achievement is what you want. You really want to be known for being successful. And later on, you might realize, you know what? It is contributing to humanity that's important to me. And so it might be that what you need to do is actually to leave your career and do something else. And being mindful of those values and being mindful of the relationship between your values and your job can help you to make that decision. And I talk in the book about somebody I know who was very successful in his career as a lawyer, actually had to take some time off because he had a sick relative that he had to take care of, and then went back to his career, was continued to be successful, and later in his career said, you know what, I need to help people. And actually quit his job and started and became the director of a nonprofit organization that really enabled him to live the values that he had at that point in his life. And you can't be afraid to do that. So yeah, I think that's the move away.
Yeah.
Then there's move on. Do I want to actually I want to continue my career but not here. And there you have to ask yourself, is this organization supportive of where I want to be? And the answer to that question can be no in many different ways. Maybe they're not going to train you for the next position. Maybe they love you, but you aspire to a particular leadership role. The higher in the food chain you move in any organization, the harder it is to stay in that organization, because if you want to move up, there are fewer and fewer positions that are available to you. And so you have to then be willing to move somewhere else in order to take on that next role. So it's not necessarily a bad reflection on the organization you're in, just that's where the jobs are. So you have to really look carefully at whether the opportunities exist within your organization, and if not, then is there a parallel organization, another group in the same industry that might be a better fit to where you are right now? And that's a hard thing for people to do. But more and more in the workplace, people are changing jobs, changing employers. So I think that certainly now, compared to, say, 40 or 50 years ago, there's very little stigma attached to choosing to take a job somewhere else. In fact, there's a great term now in hiring called the boomerang employee. And the boomerang employee is somebody who goes off and takes a job with a competitor and then comes back.
Cool.
And that happens not just because somebody might not like that competitor, but sometimes just because you leave a company because there wasn't the opportunity that you wanted at that time. And then at some time later, there is that opportunity again and you come back. So there's that moving on. And of course, moving up, which is, early on, in a job, you're learning, you're engaged, you are just really feeling like you can make this contribution that you want to make every day. And over time, you may begin to feel like, I've learned this, I know how to do this, I've mastered this, I'm not growing anymore. And that's where some dissatisfaction creeps in. And it turns out that dissatisfaction is important because it is that gap between where you are right now and where you'd like to be that creates energy for change. And so you want to harness that dissatisfaction and look for that next role and then work with other people in the organization. I think it's a great idea when you think you're ready to move up to enlist the help of other people and say, you know what, I think it's really time for me to go for the next position. Oddly enough, those other people in your life, in your workplace, they may agree with you and may actually smooth the way and pave the way for you to move forward. So, I think people are always like, well, I should hide this. You know what? If there's something you really want, you should let people know because they can't help you if they don't know what you want.
Thank you. Thank you. A couple key questions that you have people ask maybe once a year as they're moving forward. The first question, are you happy with how your career integrates with the rest of your life? And the second kind of dovetails on that. Is your job permitting you the work balance you want?
Yeah. You don't want to do this every day because sometimes at some point you got to get your work done.
Yeah.
But I do believe that at least once a year, and that can be either at your yearly evaluation, if your company does that, or it could be at significant dates in your life, like birthdays or New Year's. But about once a year, you want to reflect on am I living my dream? The fact is that we get one shot at this, and so you want to ask yourself on a yearly basis, how do I feel about this path? How do I feel about this progression? And if there's something that I am systematically failing to achieve in my life, that's my canary in the coal mine. That's what tells me that if I don't make a change, I'm going to continue to systematically fail at this. So that's one thing you want to do. And the other thing you really want to do is to ask yourself, how do I feel about that balance between my work life and my not work life? Because, it's easy to get sucked into working long hours. There's always another item on your to-do list. And people sometimes don't realize that if you go home and then come back, it's all still there. And frankly, if you work too many hours in a day, that next day you end up engaging in what I affectionately call fake work, where you're at your desk, but you're not really getting anything done. And why fake work? If you're going to fake work, go to the gym or whatever. Do something that is enriching for you. The amazing thing is, I play in a band, right? I'll go and play with my band, so I'll leave work at, 5:30, go play with the band, come home, see the family, get up the next morning. I'm eager to come to work.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Which brings us to a topic that's really weird in this country. Stockpiling our vacation time. I don't want to take my vacation. I want to show people that I'm really committed to the company.
Yeah, I don't get that at all. I think people feel like, well, this place can't run without me. And, it better be able to run without you. I tell people all the time, there's an old saying that says, if you can't be replaced, you can't be promoted. So you want to make sure that there are always people around who can do some of the things that you do. In fact, as a leader, one of the things you want to do is constantly be training people to take your job. But on top of that, you need to take time off. You need to take time off each day, and you need to take chunks of time off to have experiences that you wouldn't be able to have otherwise, whether it's family experiences to bond with your partner or your kids or your parents or whatever it is, whether it's seeing parts of the world that you've never engaged with before. You need to go and do these things, and you need to do them outside of the pressures of achieving particular goals. And even if your only goal in life is to be successful at work, it turns out that getting away from work is one of the best ways to do that, because it gives you that opportunity to percolate on ideas, on important ideas that you've been struggling with. It gives you more perspective on some of the problems that you're facing. Walking away from something for a week and coming back allows you to notice things you didn't see before. In all kinds of ways, you need to get away from work, not just overnight, but sometimes for a whole week or more at a time.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
It makes me think of one of my favorite books on business and the brain, Tinker Dabble Doodle Try by Dr. Srini Pillay. Get in, get out. Let's switch gears from here and let's talk real briefly about applying and interviewing. Just how important are first impressions?
Unfortunately or fortunately, first impressions matter a lot because every action we take in our lives is ambiguous.
Yeah.
So, is that person confident or arrogant? Well, it's hard to know. Those behaviors look really similar. It's in your interpretation of their behaviors that you determine that. The better the first impression, the more that each of your actions is interpreted in the most charitable light. And so the very same set of interview behaviors can look completely different to somebody just based on that initial impression, which is why it really matters that you come, to the interview dressed, more nicely than you may ever need to dress. People say, well, if I have, spiked hair and all that stuff, shouldn't I just come the way I am? And the answer is, you know what? You can come to your first day at work the way you are, but give people that chance to get to know you first. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting in an internet age where more applying is online. You can hire contractors online. You think, oh, I'll just whip out a fast reply to somebody. But if a fast reply comes into me, even with basic typos in it, there's actually a chance, because I don't know who I want to hire, but I know who I may not want to hire.
That's right. And early on, one of the things that everyone needs to recognize is that hiring managers are first in the process of rejecting applications because they've got way more applications than positions that they can fill. And so early on, they're just looking for reasons to get rid of somebody. And so no matter how good you are overall, that typo kicks you out because they're like, well, there's an easy reason for me to get rid of this person, even though they might have been the best applicant in the pile in many other respects. So you have to recognize, you have to get through that first process in which they're trying to find a reason to get rid of you. And so don't give them an easy one. Your resume needs to be well formatted. You should read over what you've written and make sure that you've put the right, that you don't have grammatical mistakes. Make sure the right name is on there. If you're reusing a cover letter, the last thing you want to do is to have the name and address from the previous employer on the new cover letter. Those little mistakes, which are perfectly understandable, nonetheless are things that can get you kicked out of an applicant pool. So just take a couple of extra minutes and check everything over.
And since it's all energy, I believe if you take a couple extra minutes and you send in something that's fairly clean and concise and actually has meaning behind it without those typos, you say, I care about the position. And that's what I'm looking for. Do you really care about this, or did you just slap something together?
That's right. That's right. Because at the end of the day, that's our organizations that succeed because everyone is willing to work together because we care about that mission. And you need to communicate that from the beginning, because we don't need drones working in our organizations. We need people, and we need people who actually care about that mission.
I used to do a lot of career coaching with people. One of the things that I had to work with them on was not from an egocentric point of view, but people often speak very quietly between the lines at how good they are at something. And when you're reading a CV, when you're reading a resume, you don't read between the lines.
Right, yeah. The thing is, a lot of us are taught, particularly, by the way, women, are taught to be modest. Yeah. Right? Don't toot your own horn. Well, you know what? In your resume, in your cover letter, toot your horn. That's your chance. Get it out there. Make sure people know exactly how good you are, and beware of what's called the presenter's paradox, which is when you are putting that resume together, you think everything that I can say about myself that's positive, even things that are good but not great, ought to go on there. Now, obviously, you don't want to lie about your record, but if you got honorable mention in some competition in which 8,000 other people got honorable mention, it may not be your finest moment. You actually might consider not including that on your resume. And the reason for that is because you think every good thing is going to increase your sense of goodness to the person reading it. But actually, that person reading your application is averaging across everything. And so 4 great things and 1 good thing is actually worse than just 4 great things.
Thank you. Let's switch gears from there. It's interesting that you brought up women and being toning down, not boasting about your skills, because when it comes to negotiation, if we're talking about offer day here, when it comes to negotiation, women often ask for less. What's going on? What do we do here?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that personality characteristic of agreeableness, and women on average are more agreeable than men are. And one of the things that happens in negotiation is that when you're agreeable, you tend to go along with other people's offers. You tend not to want to rock the boat. You're worried that if you ask for the things that you want, that someone's not going to like you so much in that moment. And so you don't ask for the things that you want. Well, when you're negotiating for a job, they've just said they want you. And so this is your maximum leverage point. And so that's the point at which you should ask for the things that you want and the things that you need, because that's when you're going to get them. And you're actually learning a tremendous amount about the organization by the way that they negotiate with you. If you lay out a compelling case for why your offer should be different than the one that they made for you, they need to respond to that. Now, they might not be able to give you everything that you want, but they should respond in a way that is respectful of the things that you asked for. And if they are respectful, what they're doing is demonstrating to you how it is that they're going to treat you as part of your working relationship with them. Whereas if they simply dismiss the things that you say or really don't pay attention to them, well, then they're communicating that really all along the way, they're going to be very difficult to deal with.
Thank you. What does $51,400 communicate?
So when you are negotiating with someone, one of the things that you communicate by the numbers that you use is where you think the play is in those numbers. So if I say I'd like a salary of $51,000, what I'm communicating is that the number that matters is that last number. And so they could come back with, well, how about 50,000? That's like a whole thousand different. That's a lot of money, right? That's like an oven and a half. I always say take the number and turn it into some tangible product. Yeah. Now, if I say I want $51,400, what I'm communicating to you is don't go all the way down to 50, right? I think we're negotiating over the hundreds here, right? And so I'm actually telling you where I think we're playing by the number I give. Now, it doesn't work if you go too far down. You can't say, listen, I want $51,461.74.
Crazy.
Right. That's a little much. But I think one of the things you have the opportunity to do is to take a step one lower down, one level lower down in the number than you think. And by that communicating, this is really where I think we land.
What I've always taught people when they're doing a negotiation is also you have to ask for what you feel you're worth and what you need, because if not, you're doing a disservice to your employer, because you are going to be resentful and either you're going to stop doing quality work or you'll leave.
Exactly right. Exactly right. If you undercut yourself, eventually you're going to be dissatisfied. That doesn't help anybody.
Last question on this section is, let's say you didn't get the job. So we're not negotiating right now. But what is the best question we can ask after we've taken time to pause if they've said no to us?
So for one thing, it can never hurt to reach back out and just ask, what could I do better next time? Particularly if you interviewed. I mean, if you just applied and you got a form rejection letter, they're not going to respond to you. But if you had an opportunity to interview and you feel like it went well, it's very reasonable to ask, listen, I'm, just so that I can improve, what can I do better the next time? And often they'll be willing to actually say something, at least general about, here's something you might consider doing in the future. And what you're demonstrating when you do that is that you are the kind of person that wants to learn. And maybe that actually gives you a little bit of a benefit in the future. Actually, my son that you mentioned, that we mentioned in the open here, the job that he actually got because he called back from someone from an interview that he thought had gone really well, and he said, I just like to know what I could do to improve. And halfway through the conversation, the person he was talking to said, we have this other job that's more advanced than the one that we were looking for. Would you be interested in that? And that's when he called me up and said, they just offered me a job that's better than the one that I'd interviewed for the first time. What do I do?
You say
yes. Exactly.
Woohoo! On that note, what advice would you give parents to help their kids today prepare them for this world?
The most important thing parents can do is to give their kids room to make mistakes and recover from them. We live in a world these days of helicopter parents that don't want their kids to fail, that don't want their kids to have bad things happen to them. And, I have 3 kids. They're in their 20s. I get it. I get wanting to protect them. But, the people who succeed in this world are the most resilient. And you don't become resilient by never falling. And we have to give people that chance to do that.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. On that note, what brings you the greatest happiness, Art, or what I call the woohoo factor?
I am lucky enough to have many sources of that. Yeah. Work is an unending source of joy for me, but, also playing in a band. There's nothing like being up on stage with in my case, 7 other people that I love dearly. And making music, and then seeing people on the floor dancing to it. That's also joyous. My youngest son is graduating from college on Saturday,
oh,
and
congratulations.
so and that's also joy. So honestly, waking up each day brings me a lot of joy.
Woohoo! On that note, where can people go to find out more and to find your phenomenal book?
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, you can find me. Look, I'm on social media. You can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn, and I got a Facebook author page, and you can find the things that I write that way. I have a website, smartthinkingbook.com, that has information about Bring Your Brain to Work and the other books that I've done. So reach out and find me. Love to hear from people who've read anything that I've done, even if it's a blog entry on Fast Company or Psychology Today. Just love to. I'm a teacher at heart. I want to just help people to know more of the stuff that I know.
Awesome. So if you didn't catch smartthinkingbook.com, come on over to inspirenationshow.com and we'll get you over to smartthinkingbook.com and shoot them a line. Let them know what you think about any of your reading. On that note, this has been phenomenal, Art. I can't thank you enough. This has been so much fun. This is one that I could keep going and going and going and going. Any last words of wisdom you want to share with people today?
Just don't be afraid to try something new. That's it. Just keep trying new things, and life will be good.
Woohoo!
Yes.
Thank you so much, Art.
Thanks, Michael. It's been an absolute pleasure, really.
I greatly enjoyed it as well. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, bring your brain to work, and begin bringing your brain to work today, and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so much, Art.
Thank you. This was great fun.
This was a lot of fun, and I love what you're doing, and I love what you're sharing with people.
Well, thank you. Thanks for giving me the chance to talk with you and your folks, and good luck with the show, with the show deal potentially out there. I think there's a lot of wonderful people you can reach out there.
I had the most brain-stimulating time interviewing Dr. Art Markman. I hope you did too. To check out his latest video on bringing your brain to work, click here, subscribe below.